My name is Anil Hemrajani. I'm the CEO and founder of Big Universe Learning. Very happy to have you here. We're going to go through this webinar rather quickly. It was meant to be about 20 minutes, and there's a lot of information to cover. We are going to be recording this, and we're also going to be sending a follow-up email with the infographic that we had promised. So with that, I'm going to jump right in and get started. Uh, Again, this is all about preventing summer learning loss. We're getting ready to go into summer vacation in the States. We do have some international customers joining us as well. Um, so the agenda for today is like broken up into three parts. What is summer learning loss? Just sometimes we assume we kind of know what it is, but there's a little bit of history and how it came to be, and some of the actual facts. So I'll kind of cover those, and then of course jump into the bulk of this presentation, which is the tips on preventing summer learning loss, and then just wrap it up with a couple of slides on tools that are available on Big Universe that you can leverage. So let's look at what is summer learning loss. A little bit of interesting history that even was new to me. And this is taken verbatim from a website basically, and so I'll just read it. It kind of goes back to the earlier years, 20th century type stuff, and where they were used to. Some communities used to take long summer breaks to with help with spring planting and fall harvesting. But on the flip side, in urban schools, they actually had much longer school schedule, 11 to 12 months. And then around 1900, right, the migration from farm to city, there was more mobility, so some of this kind of came together, and that's when the 9-month calendar emerged. And at that time, like 85% of Americans were involved in agriculture. And, of course, school climate control just wasn't there with things like air conditioning and all of that. But today, only 3% of Americans are involved in agricultural cycles. And of course, we've got air conditioning today, so that's not a big problem. And so it's pretty much comfortable year round, but we're still using that 9-month school year as the standard. So that's kind of one of the reasons, the big long summer vacations kind of came about. And if you want to read this entire article, it's on a website called ldonline.org. So let's look at some facts. Students need to learn and practice skills. That kind of almost goes without saying, so when they're in school, that happens almost on a daily basis. And when they're out, then, a lot of that just does not take place. And so when they're measured on standardized tests, just before summer vacation and after summer vacation, they tend to score lower on the, after summer vacation on the things that they learned in the years before. And so as a result, teachers end up having to spend 4 to 6 weeks just to get kids caught up in what they learned the year before. The other thing that we see is that, not too surprisingly, the socioeconomic status does make a difference in things like reading performance and math and so on. So low income students tend to lose about 2 months of learning, and middle income students actually have a reverse effect. Maybe it's because reading more or camps and whatnot, that they experience actually slight gains in some cases. And the studies also show that there's actually a larger overall negative effect on math skills and reading. Both of them, do take a hit, but math tends to be a little bit more. And what's interesting is that during the school year, low income and middle income students actually improve at similar rates, probably because they're getting access to the same, amount of resources in school. Um, and the other thing is that because this early learning gap happens, within the lower socioeconomic status, in the elementary, by the time they get to fifth grade, they're sometimes as far behind as 2+ years. And so that can lead eventually to higher high school dropout rates and obviously less likely to attend college. Not to mention there's, other side effects like, drugs and things like that. I mean, when there's idle time. And when you talk to parents, they cite summer as one of the most difficult times, where they have to have children do productive sort of things, especially when parents are working, things like that. So a lot of times, they just end up dropping back to TVs or video games and or just idle time. So there are some possible remedies that have been, suggested over the years. So, for example, extended school year. A lot of this comes, from comparison to international, just school systems like Japan and in South Korea or whatnot. But because of our sort of cultural, upbringing with summer as viewed as a, fun, relaxing time, there's financial, things to consider. So because of that, there's considerable opposition. Excuse me. Summer school is obviously something that happens in U.S. wide and a lot of districts, but they tend to be focused on more remedial, accelerated, enriched learning. And they do have a positive impact. And there again, middle class homes show larger positive effects, than disadvantaged homes. The third option that's been recommended is like modified calendars, where it's not necessarily extra days per year, but it's just basically distributed more evenly versus like a long summer vacation. And there's just not enough conclusive evidence right now on the success rate. The one other thing that can just be done, is enriching, activities with parent involvement. So let's look at that. Some tips for parents, basically. First of all, parent involvement is extremely important because without that, almost invariably learning loss is likely to occur. So one of the first things you want to do is to enlist parents, to commit them, you get them to commit to setting aside time during the summer, basically to preventing summer loss. They can do fun and relaxing educational activities with kids. Some of those things I'll talk about here in a couple of minutes. Leveraging local resources such as a library, youth centers, camps, and so on. And what you want to do is that to basically help them out by sending home clear instructions or ideas. So if you have access to online resources such as Big Universe, you want to send logins to make sure that that's available to them. Some of the tips that I'm going to be sharing in this presentation. Any other ideas like a list of local online resources, things like that. So let's start with some of the tips. One of the first tips that most of you probably know is that 20 to 30 minutes of reading makes a huge difference. Studies show that students who read 20 minutes a day tend to score in the 90th percentile, and students who read 5 minutes a day score only in the 50th percentile. So reading is like this, first step basically to success. The other thing is, going to the library. And nowadays, I mean, if let's say getting to the physical library is an issue, maybe the parents are at work, libraries more and more are providing digital resources. But even going to the library is a great, just a really good thing to do with parents or friends or whatever, because it's just almost like a social event. But you go there and you have access to all these books, even the atmosphere there. You see other people reading. So visiting the library or using their online resources is always a good thing. And of course, being a role model just applies across the board, right? So if you want your child to do something, being a role model, such as reading with them, basically, is always encouraging. When it comes to reading, there's some general rules that you can leverage, right, to see like what type of books are they reading. So, for example, the Goldilocks rule on figuring out is the book too easy, too hard, just right. So, for example, with too easy, they can read smoothly and fluently. Too hard, they don't recognize five or more words on the page. And just right, where they recognize most of the words, but some words, they might need to work on. Another one is like sort of the five finger rule, right? You pick a random page and you put up a one finger for every word your child doesn't know. So one finger is too easy, 2 to 3 is just right, four or more fingers too hard. Because you want students to basically be engaged in reading and not get frustrated and give up. So that's how you can help them pick the right books. Another tip is to listen to audiobooks, right? listening instead, let's say, to radio. You can listen to audiobooks during long drives. Obviously nowadays a lot of kids have iPods or headphones, so that, they can easily get um, podcasts and different things basically, or audiobooks that they can listen to. And even with Common Core, listening is one of the skills that they emphasize in addition to reading, writing, speaking, and language. So there's all these side benefits you get out of this. And it's about learning. It's not just about reading, whether it's math, it's reading. So having stimulating conversations can really help boost the language skills. Again, language being a common core, in a recommendation, basically asking questions, being positive, giving them full attention, being encouraging can always help. And it's, learning isn't just about academics, right? It can be worldly things. It can be about lemonade stands. It can be about a million things, sports and statistics. Reading to your child, especially depending on the age that they're at, just builds listening, imagination, and vocabulary skills. Not to mention that it's quality time that you're spending. And a lot of what, I'm saying over here is that summer can be fun and relaxing. With it doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be just about academics. You can have like stimulating conversations when you're reading a book to your child. Reading and writing, we've always felt at Big Universe they go hand in hand, which is why we have both reading resources and writing resources. So finding reasons for your child to practice writing skills, a book, a blog, a poem. For example, one of the things that I'm going to mention later on is that you can actually, have them document their summer activities, take photos, create a book. So there's all sorts of writings they can do and that gets them engaged. And reading helps with writing, and writing helps with reading. They're both, again, go hand in hand. There's always learn a new word each week type exercises or games you can play, right? You can have a, word of the day, basically. Post it up on the fridge, talk to them, practice sentences around it. Crafts and hobbies is another interesting way, to have fun. You could be cooking, have them read the recipes, follow instructions. There's a lot of other kinds of, hobbies. For example, baseball statistics. If you go to baseball games, that's math, right? Statistics, numbers involved, basically. Woodworking, measurements, reading instructions. So crafts and hobbies can go a long ways to make something engaging. There's games, that involve reading, math, or logical thinking. So, for example, board games like Scrabble, obviously, about words. Chess, with strategy, thinking, basically. Backgammon. There's, even games online. I don't know how many of you recall Oregon Trail, or there's Zork Online, which is actually very text-based, kind of retro type of a game, but very, educational. PBS is a great site for games online. So you can leverage games basically to, and you can also alternate between educational games and fun, games that maybe they would normally would want to play, but you can give them 20 minutes of, let's say, educational, 10 minutes of fun. So there's like, you can alternate that way. Other tips to consider if there's extended school year programs, enrolling them that, summer camps if that's viable, but maintaining consistent routine is important. For example, you can say from 10 to 11, this is what you're going to be doing, reading or writing or whatnot, and that way that the students know basically what they're doing. And again, education goes beyond academics, so there are a lot of fun things you can do. And to read more about these tips, there's a website called, friendshipcircle.org. So wrapping up here, just a few slides on Big Universe tools. For example, we've got reading, writing, and social networking that can help you. First of all, we have almost 4,200 books at your fingertips, and they, cross pretty much the pre-kindergarten to 12th grade grades. They're available in all sorts of subjects, lots of science, social studies, language arts, and math books in all the genres you can imagine, age groups, and so on. The search is extremely powerful. You can narrow it down. It's very fast, easy. You can add books to bookshelf. So, for example, students can add books to bookshelf. Teachers can add books to bookshelf and have their summer, reading list, basically. You can also have, like the students can find recommended books that are done by our system based on the books that they're reading. If that interests them, the site recommends other similar books in that genre and grade level. Creative writing and publishing, on the reading side, our books have been read over 10 million times. On the writing side, we've had over 200,000 books created. So it's an extremely engaging tool. So one of the ideas that I suggested earlier, for example, is to keep a record of summer activities with pictures, right? And then you can have the students come back and create this book over the summer, but then they can come back and share it in the fall. And you can use these summer activities to spark stimulating conversations. Again, one of the tips that I mentioned earlier, whether it's a vacation they took or a baseball game they went to or swimming in the lake. I mean, there's just a million things that you can kind of create a book, and that could be sort of a diary basically over the summer. The other good thing about Big Universe is that everybody has an account, so you can have their own students can create their own personal bookshelf, and teachers can assign books to them maybe that they want to for summer reading. And one of the other things, we constantly hear this from students. Sometimes teachers, fear that the social networking, the students are wasting time, but invariably, students we've heard across the US, they tell us it helps them find other books that they normally wouldn't have found. And the way to do that is to add friends, right? It's a very safe social networking site because it's all anonymous. You can't contact each other, no free form text allowed. But you can find people that share the same interests in the same genres, and you can add them as a friend. And all that means is you start getting their updates. Every time they add something to their bookshelf, you'll find out about it. And students can go and look at each other's, bookshelves throughout the summer to see what other books their, friends have been reading. Again, teachers can assign books to students as well. Teachers can create their own bookshelf, and that could be the summer reading list that they can send a link to parents out for. One of the other tools that we introduced recently, is this infographic. We have it available in both English and Spanish versions. This is the link. We will be emailing it out to you. Very simple link. It's a URL shortener that we use, and that's why you don't see biguniverse.com. But if you go on your browser and you simply type in x.co/learnloss or x.co/s-learnloss, S being for Spanish, you'll be able to get this infographic, and you can print it out and send it to parents. It's got pretty much all the tips that I just went over, and you'll recognize some of the graphics here. So wrapping up, one of the things that we're doing currently is we're running a promotion: buy 1 year, get the second year free. It's a very limited time promotion. You can have access to your entire school for 2 years at the price of one. If you're interested in any more information on that, you can contact Big Universe through sales@Big Universe or at our phone number. So with that, basically, this webinar has come to an end. If you have any questions, you can ask on the questions here or on the chat window, basically, and we'll leave it up. We had promised that it would be a 20-minute webinar, so we wanted to keep it as short as possible. But feel free to go to the questions tab and ask any questions you can answer. And we will be sending out an email after this with the recorded session and the infographic link.